Please listen carefully.
Hello, universe, and welcome to the Optimist Daily Update. I'm Summers McKay.
And I'm Kristy Jansen, and we're part of the team behind the Optimist Daily, making solutions the news. We bring you reader-funded solutions news every day in order to change the tenor of news media, social media, and the direction of your day to one focused on solutions.
7 days a week, we publish positive news stories written by award-winning journalists and delivered online to your inbox and through our social channels. And of course, also, we are sharing these solutions in a commute-worthy, walk-worthy, home office-worthy, or even real office-again-worthy podcast. Today is Monday, the 17th of May, 2021. Happy Monday, Kristy. How are you today?
Happy Monday, Summers. I'm well. I had a nice, relaxing weekend, and it's a little gray here in not so sunny California. We're in the gray May days of coastal Santa Barbara. So.
Yep. Well, I had a really kind of fun thing happen on Friday before I kicked off the workday after we recorded the podcast. I actually went out to coffee with a couple people, a couple parents from Brennan's school, a couple other entrepreneurs, and we went to this coffee shop called Summer Moon, and we sat outside and drank coffee together without our masks on because we were all vaccinated. And I feel like, Kristy, I'm finally like dabbling in some of your spaciousness that's coming from this next post-COVID chapter.
What a difference that makes. Yeah.
Just to be in a community with people felt so good and so like I felt like I was finding my voice again.
One thing that I have found interesting is that during this period of time, I mean, you and I have been really focused and close through our video conferences and our daily calls and the podcast. But I haven't done a lot of outreach to new people. Even though I have the ability through Zoom to network with folks or join conferences in an electronic world. And it wasn't until I started seeing people socially again in the light way in the last couple weeks. Now I'm starting to reach out to folks and connect with them over Zoom. Mm-hmm. Or in person, but I feel unleashed. I feel like my social muscles are starting to flex again in a way that even for my career, everything was on ice for this last year. So it's an interesting situation for us to be in because now we have to think about what do we want to go back to, right? Mm-hmm. And you and I were talking about that.
Go forward to. What do we want to go forward to?
Right. What do we want to go forward to? And you were expressing how you don't really want to go back to how things were before. And you're in a whole new situation. I don't want to go back to how things were before, even though I love my job. But how do we recreate our work structures that's in a way that's going to work for us?
Exactly. Well, as a just total truth bomb, I have been wrestling with this, having a toddler, being a full-time employee, being a CEO. I've been wrestling with this feeling that I shouldn't take days off or time off to be with my daughter. And if, Kristy and I, as we came together in our collaboration at the Optimist Daily, I became CEO shortly before Brennan was born. I was on conference calls immediately after her birth, and we had her, Kristy, I know you remember that day when she was 3 months and 1 day old. I dropped her off in daycare at, 8 a.m. and didn't pick her up until 5 p.m. when the bell dinged. And it just felt like this machine, this very uncomfortable machine that I just stepped into, right? I wasn't designing. I wasn't choosing. I was just responding to exactly the way I was supposed to do it, to both be a mom and have a job. And it didn't feel like I was in charge. And now, and I think you felt similarly, right? We were just doing a lot of the things that we were supposed to do as opposed to designing the career or the business experience that we want. And now, as we're stretching our new post-COVID spaciousness, how do we make sure we design what our next chapter is? And that, I think, is what leads us to the guest we have today. We're not going to talk about today's solutions. You can read those on optimistdaily.com. But we are very excited to finally have in the conversation Ken Lindner, who is an author and recently contributed to our Optimist View with a chapter from his book, Career Choreography. So Ken owns Ken Lindner Associates, a premier news and hosting agency. He has a very auspicious career, which I will let him tell us about. with a degree in social anthropology, which obviously Kristy and I love, Kristy in particular. So, Ken, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining our conversation today.
It is a pleasure to be with you, Summers and Kristy.
Excellent. Well, Ken, as you have learned a little bit about the Optimist Daily and even just overheard Kristy and my initial conversation, do you think that a lot of executives and leaders are struggling right now to figure out what this next chapter of choreography would look like for business?
Well, I think they're struggling. I think they're excited. I think that they are challenged because the pandemic has made us develop certain new models, and some of those will remain. Some of those have been tweaked. I know for me, in my company, we are all working remotely, and it has worked out beautifully. Mm-hmm. And I have people who work with me who've been with me for 15, 20, and 25 years, and some younger individuals as well. And many of my staff members have children at home. And as long as my colleagues and staff members are productive, I think it's great that they can work from home. And if they can be the stay-at-home parent they would like to be and interact more with their child or children, I think that's great. And if we can help structure work-life balance and also be productive, I think it's a win-win. Now, I may be an anomaly, I'm not sure, but I will tell you that many of the businesses, if not most of the businesses that I deal with, will be different come, let's say, this July than they were 2 years ago. There will be changes.
Definitely. I think Kristy and I, we talk about going forward to something better or back to better. There will be changes. Well, as we talk about designing those changes, let's hear a little bit about your background. What do you do in addition to writing very impactful books? What's your background and what do you do for a living?
Well, my background is I'm from Brooklyn, New York, and I was a late blooming, awkward, overweight child, youngster, and part of it had to do with the fact that my dad worked all the time and my mom was a stay-at-home mom. And they had arranged that because my dad wanted me to have the education he never had, and we didn't have lots of money, so he had to work 6 and 7 days a week sometimes, and many nights to put me through private school, which they wanted to do. And the story basically is, I believe that my mom loved me. My dad didn't because I intuited. My mom was always there. My dad was never there. So my dad just didn't love me. I didn't understand at 4 and 5 and 6 years old why he was never there. And my dad's dad died very early on in his life. So he didn't have a fathering role model to fall back on. So he didn't know how to relate to me. But eventually we bonded athletically, and that brought us together, and that made me feel far more secure. I got his approval, and I felt his love. But there was a good deal of insecurity within me early on. And luckily, I had a mom who was there, who loved me unconditionally. I had a sociology teacher in high school who saw the best in me because I fell in love with the study of people. And Kristy, that's how I got into studying anthropology. And I had a tennis coach who believed in me. And with their wind beneath my wings, I was able to self-actualize and come out of it. And through the love of others and the positive support of others, I evolved. And my mission in life is to see what can be in others and be the wind beneath their wings. So because of my background, I have taken on the mission of helping people be all that they can be. And where the term career choreography comes in is that what I love to do is find people where they're at today, figure out or hear them tell me what it is they aspire to do, what it is they would love to be. And I love figuring out that logical set of steps that takes them to that dream, to that goal. So nothing makes me happier than to help them fulfill a goal that they covet, that they treasure, and eventually live their dreams. And through being a talent representative, or as I call it, a career choreographer, I give people those steps to put the percentages in their favor that they will attain their goals.
Mm-hmm. Ken, thanks so much for being transparent about your young life. I think that's so interesting to think how our early experiences with our own parents and then those other really important adults really can help shape us in becoming the people that we end up becoming. And I have a very similar experience where my parents were not necessarily the ones who were there for me, but finding those other attachment figures, those other mentors has really been so important to me. And of course, I also have my background in anthropology, and so I was very interested in that. And I'm wondering, now that you are at this stage in your life, because you're more on the other side where you're the mentor, you're the supporter, I'm wondering if you're seeing a shift in how your clients or the people you work with are looking at what they expect from their lives versus 20, 30 years ago.
That's a great question. And I think it's as I said, it's a great question because, with the pandemic, for example, I think people's perspectives are so different than pre-pandemic. With us experiencing the fragility of life, the fragility of health, I think people really want more out of their professional lives, more out of their lives. And I can tell you, so many of my clients have come to me and said, I want to spend more time at home. I want to spend more time with family. I want more meaning out of my job. I just don't want to go through the motions and be unhappy for so much of my life because I work so many hours, so many days.
Yeah. And even your reflection on your father's absence in your young life, and Summers is now experiencing that with her. She's got a very young child and she wants to be there as her mother while also having her career. It's just finding that balance is something that I think we're all confronting that in our lives. And so I appreciate your perspective on that.
No question. I'm hearing this daily. It is pervasive. So
when you hear this from your clients and just in the zeitgeist, really, what do you recommend for people who are, what are some of the steps people take to suss out the answer for themselves? Because as in career choreography, it's very individualistic. Every person has a different process. So how do you help guide people?
Well, in my book, I talk about this. And though choreographies are very personal, there are universal steps that people can take. The first thing I think you really need to do is dig down deep. And this is a great pivotal time. It's a great time for a fulfilling reset. And you mentioned it at the top of the show. How are you going to move forward? And this is a great time to think about what it is I really want in my life. What are my preeminent values? And if we're talking about professionally, what do I love to do in my job? What am I good at? What don't I want in my job? And then it is so important for your second step to write a set of lists, which I call your clarifying lists. And those lists are, once again, comprised of the things that you love to do, the things that you're really good at, the things you don't want to do. What will make your heart sing? What's your ideal job? Because once you write all of these things down, one, it clarifies for you the kinds of jobs you should apply for and accept. Because if you see that a particular job meets all those criteria, it will help you to say yes. And I'll give you a story about that afterwards. The second reason it's good to write a list is because once you write all that down, you're better able to articulate to a prospective employer what it is that makes you special, why you stand out, and the values added that you can bring to that company. The third reason a clarifying list is really beneficial is because so many of us are fearful about taking that first step, about, can I get into the workforce in a job I really want? Can I get back into the workforce? The unknown can be very daunting. And I believe writing lists empowers you. It gets you moving in a positive direction. You're achieving baby steps, and it really dissipates the fear within you. So writing a clarifying list is really, or a set of lists is very important.
Right. And I think, Ken, I like that idea a lot. And it doesn't necessarily need to be a list, right? It could be a mind map or something where Summers and I do.
We're big journaling fans and big vision board fans around here.
There is something about getting it out of mind and just seeing what comes out, which can help clarify. I like that word, clarifying, and get in touch with your personal essence and your personal goals and aspirations. And once you attach that and identify those, it's easier then to know what the next steps you might take. And I think you were talking about the term being constructive in your life. We talk a lot about having agency, and that's what we're trying to do with the Optimist Daily. One of our sort of underlying goals is to help reattach people to that solutions mindset, because when the world seems big and scary, it's so easy to get shut down. And this is what you're talking about, is going away from that feeling of overwhelm and instead taking control back and taking some agency back and being constructive.
No question. And in fact, Kristy, I remember when I took my social anthropology courses, one of the things that I remember in my freshman year was people want control. They don't want to be out of control. And one of the ways you gain control is by writing a list, or in any other form that, journaling or whatever it is that makes you comfortable. It's so important. And I'll also say that I believe writing a list or journaling can do two other things. One very important thing is when you start to do that, other things flow from writing that list. I know when I speak in front of people, I come up with things I didn't even know I knew. And one speech that I gave turned out to lead me to write a book. And because I came up with something that I really wasn't thinking about initially, but as I kept talking, or as I kept writing in this case, you never know what you'll come up with. The other thing is, if you write it down, you can see the order. You may want to reorder it. You can see sort of your most treasured value. What am I really going for? Your dream versus smaller goals. And it gives you a sense of order, which is what we're talking about.
And I think that's so interesting because that's part of the creative process, right? You kind of have to let yourself just flow and be really crazy and wild in the beginning. And one of the things, I'm an editor professionally. I love the editing process. And sometimes it's really hard to get started. But once you have that really awful first draft or that massive list that seems crazy, you can pinpoint the things that really sing and just focus on those and put order to that. And that's being constructive.
Right. Kristy, I think as we go back, even your own experience going back into the world and having conversations with people and being in person again is, in a way, it's like rehearsing the conversations of who and how you want to be in this next chapter. So even just, the list writing, the list making, the ideas, the journaling, and even talking to other people who inspire you. Like our chance to talk to you, Ken, right? I can hear Kristy and I both evolving just in the conversation, thinking about the choreography for what's ahead for all of us. So this isn't just for people who are currently looking for a job. It's for people who are sort of also evolving the job that they have, right? Ken, people can move forward even if, we can actually move industries and careers forward too.
Oh my goodness, absolutely, Summers. There's no question. There's so many people who are in a job now who just don't feel satisfied, don't get meaning or purpose from their job. So they too need to dig down deep and find out what it is that they want to aspire towards, and then figure out the steps as to how to get there. So it's really important for everyone. If you want to self-actualize, the most constructive thing you can do is really think about what would make your heart sing. What's the right balance for you? What satisfies the needs and values that you have? And one thing that's really important, these have to be your values, not your parents, not your spouse, not your partner, your values, because they're your decisions and it's your life. And as they said, you make your bed, you have to sleep in it.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure you make decisions that, of course, being a solutionary, you want to benefit everyone. But it's also really important when you're making very personal decisions to make sure, if nothing else, you're in touch with what it is you want. And don't make decisions only to satisfy others. You've got to sort of find that balance between taking care of yourself and being a solutionary.
Right.
Absolutely.
And I think that what you're talking about is really living your own life from your own center. Yes. And looking out from there, as opposed to looking at yourself from the outside perspective, and making sure that you're fitting into what you think is expected of you, but instead flipping that around so you can feel what you really want, and then letting that be your driving motivation. So I really resonate with that. Yeah. Well, one of the things that I find really interesting about talking to you, and I think your thoughts on career are super interesting and important, but I also am very interested in your perspective, because your career has really focused on figures in the news media. So a lot of your clients and a lot of the talent that you're actually engaging with are the people that we see on the entertainment news sphere, the Lester Holtz of the world, right?
Yes.
And since our job here at the Optimist Daily is largely motivated towards influencing the way that we consume the news that it's brought to us, and helping to shift that conversation a little bit, not necessarily to go away from reporting on the real troubles and real problems in the world, but rather to, in addition to that, alongside that, also talk about the real solutions and the heroes, the inspirational folks. So I just wanted to see what your thoughts were on the news media as a cultural force.
Well, that is
from an optimistic point of view.
Yeah, I would say certainly, like, you've worked with a lot of newsmakers, and if we look at or news journalists, if we look at your roster, they are a lot of these positive focused journalists who are really telling good stories.
Well, it's interesting because Lester, at the end of every newscast, give or take, has a very positive story to end the newscast. It's almost like, when you go to bed to something positive at the end. And he loves these stories. And I think NBC News, generally, for their nightly newscast, has a positive story, whether it's a hero story or there's good news or whatever it is. So there's no question that those stories are very personal and they resonate with the viewers. And I think it's really important because there is so much negativity in the news, or news that, is unsettling, if nothing else. And, part of that is that there must be research out there that says, you want to, when it's local news, cover the car chases, cover the fires, cover the shootings, and maybe not spend as much time on the feel-good stories. I believe, originally when news started, it was supposed to be this public service, and it wasn't a profit center. The news now is a money-making profit center. It's been that way for decades. And most businesses obviously run on being as profitable as they can. And when it comes to news, it's securing the most viewers you can. And there must be some research that shows that giving people what they're watching now is what it is they want, because if you give people what they want, then you will get more viewers. The question is, and this has been a question that's been in news since the beginning of news, do you give people what they want or give people what they need? Which is
right.
Well,
we we have found at the Optimist Daily that you are absolutely right, Ken, that the appetite, it's sort of like, do you give people junk food, right? And we call it brain junk food is the negative news media cycle. And at the Optimist Daily, we have been determined to flip the script on it. And we are so excited. And I'm sure you know this, but during the pandemic, just that evolution you've heard of people talking about wanting more from their lives, we've heard and responded to people wanting more from the news. And we are so delighted at the Optimist Daily that to see this appetite for positive solution-based constructive news media just rising and bubbling. And so just like Lester ending the nightly news on a positive story, we're starting the morning on a positive story, right? Let's kick off every day with how can we change this world for good? And so when Kristy and I read Career Choreography, we both were like, well, this is like industry choreography because it's exactly the directional change we are excited for. And I love that you're seeing that the newscasters that you work with and represent are starting to do this as well, because it is the direction that I think will lead to a bigger, brighter world for all of us.
And I like the definition, like giving people what they want versus what they need. But I think one sort of complicating part of that is that I think that there's somewhat of a manufactured desire, kind of like how
it's like a sugar addiction.
They get addicted to sugar, and they are always looking for that stimulation. And the way that the profit-driven media, the attention-grabbing media is structured is to, if it bleeds, it leads. You have to start with that and sort of shock people or scare people so they pay attention. And what gets overlooked is the deeper stories, the way that we dig out of things. And then that's just, it doesn't have the emotional highs, but it has a longer trail. It actually has a deeper effect.
I was thinking, Kristy, we should change if it bleeds, it leads to if it glows, it grows or something like that. We need a new phrase.
Well, I would love to say something though, just to jump on what you both were saying. I think now that the pandemic, I'm not saying it's over, but hopefully we're seeing a very bright light at the end of this tunnel. And we've seen so much violence. We've seen so many shootings recently. There are a lot of noble people in news. I know my clients would love to report on things that are positive, and they would love to be solutionaries. People go into news for the most part because they want to solve problems. They want to inform. They want to be essential workers. And I know that management too, you want to feel like you're doing something good with your life. So I think all of us would like to feel good about what we do every day, newscasters and news executives and program executives alike. If there's ever a time now for the movement that you're talking about to take hold, I think it is now. I think we will want positive news. We crave positive news. We crave solutions. We crave the solution for the pandemic, the vaccine, the cure. I mean, we are craving positive solutions right now. So I think the Optimist Daily, it's your time.
I love that. And so I think we've got to wrap this up. I know you've got to get going on your day. We have to get going on ours, but we always like to end our conversations with a final question. And this can be personal, it can be broader, but we always like to ask, what in the world right now, or what in your life right now is what's feeding your optimism? What makes you optimistic?
What makes me optimistic is that while you're alive, you can change your life starting today with the decisions and life choices that you make. I'm the founder of Positive Life Choice Psychology. And I believe, your life choices are like train tracks, and that the trains go where the tracks take you. Your lives go where your decisions and choices take you. So it's really important starting today to make great life choices.
Oh, that's
Amazing.
That's beautiful. Summer, sorry to talk over you, but I thought it was great.
Our collective agreement, Kristy, it's just, I can feel all of this warmth bubbling in this conversation. And Ken, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been lovely to have this conversation with you. I know this podcast, this will be one of our evergreen shows that we remind people to listen to for years to come. And I just want to kind of close out and thank everybody for listening to the Optimist Daily update this week. We promise to continue to share positive solution-based stories with ideas on how you can participate in this changing world and ensure it is changed for the good. We promise to cover the current events with accuracy, legitimate sources, and offer you the information needed most to chart new paths for all of us.
And if you are not already, please consider becoming an emissary on the optimistdaily.com. And for just $5 a month, you can help support reader-funded independent journalism. Be a part of the solution-changing consciousness that addresses our world's biggest challenges with that problem-solving mindset. Please help us keep the Optimist Daily free to all who need it, supported by those of us who can. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow with more solutions. Thank you, Ken.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ken.
Pleasure.